So glad to welcome all of you today. Thank you for joining us for this town hall webinar with President of School Year Abroad, Tom Hassan, Chair of SYA's Board of Trustees, Kirk Davenport, SYA France Resident Director, Mina Qadir, and Alvarez Global Scholar from the class of SYA France 2020, which may be the most interesting year of SYA's history. Debatable, I know, but so that is Annika Milliman, who's joining us as well. My name is Erin Erickson. For those that haven't met me before, I am SYA's Director of Advancement. It is my pleasure to welcome you today, so thanks again for joining us. I want to start with a huge thank you. If you are joining us, then you have recently invested in the future of SYA with a gift or a pledge to the Campaign for SYA, and or you have made a leadership gift to to our last year's annual fund, the 2019-2020 SYA Annual Fund. And because of your support, I'm very happy to announce that we have reached the $12 million mark for the campaign out of an $18 million goal. And so we're making great progress. And additionally, you helped us achieve the 2019-2020 SYA annual fund goal of 1.2 million. And that happened in a year when many schools and organizations did not reach their goals and came up short financially. So this speaks volumes to the dedication of the SYA community and to your passion for SYA's mission. So more importantly, you have helped make an incredible SYA experience possible for recent students. Annika, whom you will meet shortly, is one of those students. She came from a public high school in New Hampshire, which is actually where I am and where Tom is currently sitting in New Hampshire. And she required financial aid in order to be able to attend SYA. So through the campaign, and specifically because of the generosity of the Alvarez family and the endowment that they set up, Annika was able to study abroad in France and had a transformative year. So you may remember, I'm just going to make a plug because I say it every time, that the Alvarez family also offered $1 million in matching funds, and that's for any leadership gift of $100,000 or more to the campaign, and they will give $25,000 for every leadership gift of $100,000 or more. So they'll match it at 25% is actually a more accurate way to say that. So to date, we have secured just over $300,000 from their matching opportunity. So thank you to the Alvarez family, and thank you to all of you who have helped to unlock these matching funds so far. So before handing it over to Tom, I want to remind you all that this webinar is being recorded. It may be distributed to others who are not able to attend. And also we have allocated some time at the end to cover a few questions. So please feel free to use that little Q&A box at the bottom if something comes to mind that you would like to ask. With that, I pass the Zoom spotlight over to SYA President Tom Hassan and Chair of the Board, Kirk Davenport, to give an update.
Great. Erin, thank you so much. And before I take a moment to thank the group on this webinar, Erin, I want to thank you and your staff. You've done a remarkable job. What a year it's been for all of us. And you've pivoted using all this great technology to connect with people. In fact, there have been a lot of mini class reunions through Zoom and a number of good things happening. And as we approach the final year of the capital campaign, I've just been a great partner with you, and I thank you and your staff for all that you do. And really, I want to emphasize strongly the thanks that Erin gave to the people on this webinar who have really been generous donors to SYA now and over time, and it just has infused us with not only the funds we need, but with the wonderful support and enthusiasm for the program that we just love. And just by quick history, I have actually known SYA for almost 40 years. I was at Exeter for almost 30, and I sent a number of students, advisees of mine, teacher colleagues over, sat on the SYA board, and for the past 5 years, I've just been honored to be running SYA. And with me in that venture is Kirk Davenport, who's the SYA board chair, France class of 77. He and Ken Crushell have been the two board chairs I've worked with. They've given remarkable amounts of time and deep dedication. And I have to say that Kirk and I were probably on the phone almost every day last winter and spring as we maneuvered just the craziness of the pandemic. I have to say, maneuvered it well according to students and parents and RDs, and people have felt that we held the health and safety of the kids foremost in our minds. So that, and also I want to do a special thanks to Mina, and now Mina and I are on phone calls every day about the semester 2 coming up, and I'll mention that in a minute. And Annika, it's great to see you again. I think I met you way back at Logan Airport on the departure about a year ago. So it's thank you for being on today. So let me just, what I'd love to do is just talk a little bit about where we are right now in terms of our program. And then I'll turn it over to Kirk to talk about the long-term work that the board is digging in on these days. So where we are right now, as most of you know, that we were unable to run this fall. It was clear when we had to make that decision in the summer that the consulates were not open. There was no prospect of them really opening up in time to get visas for students. And at that point, also member schools and sending schools really needed to know whether students were going to be there in the fall or not. They were carefully planning their population and how that was going to work. So we made the decision, and looking back on it, it was clearly the right one because it did not open up for us. We have now been talking daily with the RDs, again, with health and safety in mind. Can we do this? And we're actually posed ourselves 3 questions. Can we open up? And what are the barriers for that? If we do open up, how do we do this? How do we maneuver all of this new world of pandemic? And then the third question that the board will wrestle with in a few weeks is, okay, if we're able to do all that, should we? And that's the risk analysis and all of this. And so we're, I would say in about 3 or 4 weeks, you will know the answer to that question, whether we can do it. There may be, and this is not any hint, but we could open up all 3 campuses in Europe, or depending upon what's going on, we might open up two or one of them. So we'll see how it goes. The good news this week, one of the concerns we had was we had heard a number of times that the French government was not opening up to minors. They were going to let college kids go over and study, but not minors. Well, Mina, thank you. Mina and I were on phone calls, writing letters, and sure enough, the other day we got the great news that is no longer a hurdle, that they're going to offer that. So we're just breathing a sigh of relief. It's the way I describe the last month or 2 is like a roller coaster. You kind of have these ups and downs, and you kind of ride with them. And what I say to my friends who are former and current heads of school like me, just like, no one told us the playbook on this one, and so we're writing it every day. And so, but I'm glad to have a great team around me to be able to write it with. So with that, I'm going to turn over to the fearless board chair, Kirk Davenport. And again, thanks, Kirk, for all your work.
Thanks. Well, let me start with a few thank yous. Erin is fabulous. If you don't know Erin, you need to know Erin. If you have sent Erin a check, thank you. If you haven't sent Erin a check, please get to know Erin better, because she's very persuasive. We are in a really fabulous position as an organization, in large part because of the donor generosity of the folks on the phone. We're going to talk a little bit about that, I guess, here and then at the board meeting, but we are a survivor of this perfect storm. Not everyone will be. A lot of schools are really teetering. We are not. We are taking some body blows. We lost the first semester, which is terrible, financially, emotionally, from every angle, but survivable. So we're now in the midst of planning second semester. I'll talk about that in a second. Tom and I will probably ham and egg a little bit, but let me also say thank you to Mina for being Mina, and as a representative of our RDs. Mina is fearless, fierce, an unbelievable advocate, loves the kids, they love her, and she, to me, embodies what makes SYA so magical, because she is there on the ground, making it work every day. The complexity of the host families and the local government issues and U.S. government issues, and oh, wow. So she is delivering the magic directly. So we love Mina, and thank you, Mina, for being who you are. So we're also super lucky to have great leadership with Tom, and that might not have been as critical in a calmer time, but it's absolutely critical now. And as we look at all the many challenges we face as an organization, coming through it strong, maybe stronger, is a result of good leadership. And I don't think Tom knew what a difficult job he was taking when he said yes, but he not only said yes, he renewed his agreement, and he's agreed to stay on one more year than he originally, possibly longer, but at least through the end of the storm, which again, I think is just a sign of a great leader. He cares about the team and the ship, and he's making sure that we are stable again before we even talk about any other plans. So thank you, Tom. What are we talking about as a board? Well, all the things you might imagine. Obviously dominant at the moment is, can we get open for the second semester? If we can open, meaning local schools in our jurisdictions are open, visas are available, we have sufficient interest from parents and kids, is there any reason we shouldn't run? And the only answer I can imagine there is that we felt somehow that we could not responsibly take care of our children, our students, they're not children, our kids, let's say, while they were over there. And we're rapidly developing our protocols for what's going to happen in the event of somebody testing positive. And I'm quite confident that we're going to be able to take very good care of our kids in all 3 locations, and that we will open. We haven't made that decision yet, but I think if we can, we should and will. So I predict, even though we haven't had the conversation with the board yet, that we will. So that's great. Will we get, we have 89 families signed up. Will other families show up? Will we end up with more? More likely there's a little bit of melt at the last minute. I hope not, but it's okay if there is. And from a board perspective, I think we're prepared to lose money in order to deliver the magic to the kids, rather than, simply focus on finances. And again, thanks to you all, because the reason we can do what's best for the organization and not just focus on treasure is that we have a fairly hefty treasure for an organization our size. And the capital campaign could not have come at a better time, because it's allowed us to make decisions in the way you would want decisions to be made. What's best for the kids, what's best for the long term, and not have to focus on, purely pinching pennies to get through the storm. So what else is on the agenda for the upcoming board meeting? We're going to talk about a number of things that we have been talking about for a while. Right sizing, which is the painful process of adjusting our organization to reflect a different student population. We were built for a 250 student population. We had that high water mark for a while, but we're now anticipating about half of that, partly because we have 3 locations now, not 4. And yet delivering the excellence that people have come to expect. How do we do that? There's been literally years of conversation about it. I won't get into the gory details here, but I will just say that I believe we can deliver excellence at, or maybe even better than, the level we have in the past, by making some tactical decisions about how we deliver our product. Maybe there's a few less electives, but with 30 kids in a location, I think that will be just fine, and the kids will have a fantastic experience, even if they only have 2 electives to choose from instead of 5. So things like that. We're trying to do it in a way that's preserves the fabulous faculty and staff we have in place in all 3 locations, and trying to balance patience and fiscal responsibility. So we still have a few more steps to go, but we're, I don't know, Tom, 90% of the way home on that. So I'm very happy about that. That was a program that started before the proverbial fan got hit here. And thank goodness, because it positioned us to weather the storm, from a place of strength instead of on our heels. Another topic is what I, as a Brown grad, can't help calling the new curriculum, although it really isn't that new. It's more the evolution of our curriculum over the last few years. We've made a lot of progress, some of it quite quickly. And I think one of our most important projects now is consolidating those gains and really getting the new MO down, having every teacher get it, the capstone project. How are we going to refine that? What does it mean? The practicum, how does that fit in? And so there's some refinements to the curriculum that are very exciting, and I think bringing us 20 years forward from our older model, and an overdue renovation to the curriculum. Very exciting. Mostly done, but still work to do to refine it. So those are two things. A third thing is, what are we going to do about China? We closed the Beijing operation as it is currently configured. And initially that was just a response to the pandemic. But at the moment, the decision is that we can't run that again as it was configured. But Tom is convening a group of member school folks, former China alums, faculty, RDs, to try to figure out if there is a way to run a program in Asia, ideally China, ideally Beijing, but open-minded on all of that, that maybe in a different format can be more attractive to, enough more attractive that we can get to critical mass there. The enrollment was crawling downwards over the last 5 years plus. And so that is reimagining China is one of our projects. I think lastly, but I'm probably leaving something out and Tom will help me remember, we decided before this year to launch semesters as an option in a quiet way with limited seats available for semester students, and see how that goes. This is a conversation I've been in as a board member for 5 years, and I'm sure most of the people listening have a strong view one way or the other. The year-long program for anyone who did it was the magic. You really start, dreaming in the mother tongue in your second semester, and a one semester program would not be the same. But we need to evolve. We need to be responsive to the market pressures and to what students want. And we don't know for sure that semesters will be a strongly demanded option, but we have to be nimble. And so we're going to try it. And it may be a mistake, and if it is, it'll be my fault and I'll take the hit for that. But I think we'll learn about whether it's a mistake. I hope it isn't. We'll learn about how to get it right. We'll learn how to balance the one semester and the 2 semester option. We need to evolve in order to be responsive and attractive to students with such rich lives that maybe they be willing to give us 6 months, but not 12. So that's happening. Obviously, we're launching a semester program right now, I hope, for the second semester, but this isn't quite what we had in mind. But, we're going to get better at how to deal with kids that we only have for a semester. So right sizing, the new curriculum, reimagining China, and the semester program are all board topics that we've been talking about for some time. And in addition to how and should we run for the second semester, that's what we're going to be talking about at our November meeting. What did I leave out, Tom?
You did a great job. That was a full and helpful summary. I'll just underscore one thing you were talking about, Kirk, which is the change of curriculum. And I think what's exciting about it is that we're able to maintain the things that are really important. Obviously, the language learning, the math and English that students need in order to return to their schools and get the credit. But the other thing that we've done is really evolve the day-to-day so that students get a chance to get out of their seats and use the location. So the experiential learning, and that's a great segue to kind of bring Mina and Annika into the conversation, because I'd love to hear from them. But before I do that piece, let me ask, whenever I meet alums, I always say to them, tell me a little bit about how you found out about SYA. I'm always fascinated by how people find their way there. And why don't we just start with that question so you get to hear a little bit from Mina and Annika just in a general way. How did each of you get connected to SYA? How did you find your way to this wonderful organization?
I guess I can start. So I had some family friends that had done SYA, and they went to my same high school, and I always thought it was such a cool opportunity that they got to go abroad and experience something different. I'm from a very small town in New Hampshire, and I've always lived here, and after a while it becomes sort of a bubble, and I needed a change. I just needed to experience something different, and I have always really loved the French language and learning another language. So I decided to apply to SYA because I thought it had a great structure. The curriculum looked great, and there was a travel component with the school, which I thought was really great. So I decided to apply, and I got in, and I got the Alvarez scholarship, and I wouldn't have been able to go to France without it. So I'm so grateful that I got the scholarship and that I was able to go. So that's sort of briefly how I found out about SYA.
Well, we're delighted that you found your way. Mina, and I'm sure you were too, because you were with her last year. So.
Right, I was. Well, bonjour de Rennes, bonsoir de Rennes, bonjour aux Américains. So my name is Mina Qadir. I'm the resident director here at SYA France. Thank you for your kind words, Tom and Kirk. Just quickly to sort of explain how I heard about SYA the first time. The context in which I heard about the school in the beginning was quite extraordinaire, unusual. I was actually in a nail salon in Rennes. My husband and I were, with our kids, were on a sabbatical in France in 2015. And I happened to wait for my turn at this salon when I heard this lady speak English with what sounded to me as a heavy East Coast accent. I couldn't really place it, so I was thinking Boston, New York. So I just walked up to her and said hello, and to quite frankly practice my English. We had been here in Rennes for 5-6 months, and I hadn't spoken much English. Long story short, after a few minutes, she had told me about her husband being the director of this American school in Rennes, and I had told her about my background as a French language professor in the US. So she mentioned that there was some type of job opening at her husband's school. The director at the time was Denis Brochu. So she gave me his cell phone number, and the next day I wasn't looking for a job. I was obviously on a sabbatical doing my nails, and she, out of curiosity, I just called, and Denis was very nice on the phone. We set up an appointment, and I walked out of his office being the school part-time college counselor. So I'm very glad I did engage in that conversation with Linda, and they're now back in the US, and we're still in touch. So that was my SYA story.
Well, we're certainly glad that you and Linda connected with the nail salon. When I'm there in Rennes next time, you have to take me to the nail salon. Anyway, what I'd love, I know Erin mentioned this, last year was such a different year in the spring. But before that, we kind of highlight a moment, Annika, for me that kind of captured your time in Rennes. What was that kind of SYA moment for you?
There's so many to choose from, because I think a lot of while I was in Rennes, I thought I was sort of living in like a dream, like the perfect European student abroad dream. But I'd say, gosh, I think one of the coolest moments I had was actually very small. I was standing at a bus stop after having dinner with my friends, and I was at the bus stop alone waiting to go home, and the bus system in Rennes is called the STAR system. And there are a bunch of starmen, I call them, who basically walk around République, which is where all the buses, which is where you catch all the buses. And I was standing alone, and so one of the starmen came up and started talking to me. He goes, "Are you okay? You know, I'm gonna have a conversation with you so that it doesn't look like you're all alone." And I understood everything he was saying. And he was speaking in French, and I could respond in French. He didn't ask me if I was American, despite my American accent. And I think that was one of the greatest moments because I was like, wow, I'm really in France and I'm understanding what this person is saying and he's understanding me, and we're having a conversation, just a random conversation on the street. And then I took the bus home and I never saw him again, and I probably never will. But I think that was one of the greatest moments for me. Just, it sort of solidified all I had learned during the year, and sort of my independence. Like, I can go and talk to a random person in a foreign language that I didn't know 6 months prior. So that was a really exciting moment, and I think it sort of encapsulated SYA for me.
Terrific, terrific. Mina, how about you for last year, again, before the pandemic? What kind of captured the year 2020, or the class 2020 for you in Rennes?
Sure. I like Annika said, there were many highlights, but what comes to mind right now is most likely our faculty, and Kirk touched on that. If I had to pick three things in regards to highlights, in particular, this past year that was quite difficult in many regards, I would first mention the faculty, fieldwork, curriculum. Again, Kirk talked about that, and maybe school trips. So to start with the faculty, I mean, the faculty's role in completing the overall SYA goal is essential. So as we all know, great things are rarely achieved by just one person. So we're lucky to have a team here on the ground that is very, very committed. And Annika and her peers actually showed their appreciation to the teachers in a very touching video they shared with us at our last Zoom call back in May. And what we really transpired, and which we know, but because they had made the video and they had waited for this last Zoom call to show it to us, is that the faculty plays a central role in shaping the student experience. Our faculty is well versed in teaching young American students, and they're experts in their respective fields. So we're very fortunate to have teachers who can both do two things. One is to sort of give knowledge in a very traditional way, but also assist students with the learning process and applying knowledge in real situations. So this is even more true this year because our world changed, and our faculty was really able to adapt quickly, both in addressing the expectations of our learners, of today's learners, but at the same time addressing the unexpected. So if I had to pick one success story along these lines, it would be March 13th, when I actually had to announce to the students that they were going home within the next 24 hours. And I remember things happened very quickly. They were about to board. I think they were on a bus already. The bus hadn't left Rennes, but they were on the bus going for field work to Dinard. They were supposed to spend a day at a high school, French high school, by the water. And I called on the teachers and I said, you know, you're coming back to school. I need to announce something. So at that moment, half the faculty stayed back in Rennes to support the students, and the other half volunteered to accompany the students to Charles de Gaulle, making sure that everybody was safely boarding their planes. And right after that, you know, you were talking about a roller coaster, Tom, earlier. They came back, and that weekend was quite strange. We came back to an empty school on Monday, and we had a week together to come up with a plan and develop an online program for our students. So so I really wanted to highlight the faculty's role tonight. In regards to fieldwork, I really want to talk about it, and tell me if I'm taking too much time. But fieldwork was really, really a highlight this year. It's something that we tried this past September, and we had 9 months to sort of do everything we wanted to, and the year got cut short. But anyways, to just explain very quickly what fieldwork is and what Kirk was referring to earlier in regards to the new curriculum changes, is that we have freed an entire day of the week. So we moved away from the traditional 5-day of school to a 4-day within the school building, and the students are actually outside of the building on Thursdays, and we call them Fieldwork Thursdays. Students are sent out on missions outside of the walls, and they asked to actively immerse themselves in the community and apply what they have learned in the classroom. So to give you guys a visual of how it goes, I just want to take a second to sort of give you an example of the first fieldwork students did back in September of last year. And maybe Annika can give her feedback after I describe it. So it was September 6th of last year, and we had decided on day 1 of school, during what we call our immersion unit, to send students in groups of 4 out in the city, which is 10 minutes here from school. The faculty had come up with different landmarks they wanted the students to find on their own. So we sent them out. We took their phones away and gave them a map, a paper map, and they had to find these 10 places. They were in groups of 4. They were not alone. It was about 1:30 p.m. when they left the building. We knew most of them would fail, and that was okay, because the essence of fieldwork is for them to actively participate and not come back with all the right answers. So they left at 1:30, and we were thinking that by 3:30 they would be here. None of them was back by 3:30. We started to get nervous at 4. They were still not in the building. I honestly thought that a few of them were on a flight back to Boston. Luckily, right after 4 p.m., they started showing up one by one. They all had failed to find all the landmarks, but they had found their way back to school without their phone and using the target language. So as a faculty, we felt like we had accomplished our mission. A month later, we repeated the activity with them. They left at 1:30, came back at 3 with a ton of confidence, and asked like what they had to do next. So it's just to try to describe what fieldwork is and the changes we've made to the curriculum this year. And very briefly, because we talked about curriculum and because school trips are so important to them, they very much enjoy them, as you can all imagine. So this year we spent a lot of time, and I come back to the faculty because we did apply ourselves and spent a lot of hours working on fieldworks, whether they were here on Thursdays in Rennes or during school trips. But we designed fieldworks that were interdisciplinary in nature, and there was evolution, meaning that toward the end of the year, much later into the year, when students are more comfortable with the target language and doing these missions, for a Paris trip in February, we asked them to design a fieldwork for themselves. So to be completely honest, because Annika is on the call, we had to reject a few of the proposals. Some of them had proposed to go do a fieldwork, shopping fieldwork in the Champs-Élysées. There was
that was not Annika, I assume.
No. So we rejected quite a few of them, but on a serious note, we retained some of their suggestions, and we did the catacomb, which they linked to their language class and science class, the cimetière du Père Lachaise, and the bateau mouche, because they wanted some perspective taking and looking at the city from the water. So these were real highlights, because we lived these moments with them, and it's very special. to do that with them. So I said I would speak to 3 highlights of the program, but of course, there are many other, such as our host families, our ongoing collaboration across sites, or extracurriculars. So I don't want to take all the time.
Oh, well, no,
Wonderful.
that's really helpful. Annika, do you have a favorite field work Thursday out of your time there?
I think one of my favorite field works was experiencing the December 6th greve in France. That was a very hands-on field work. I don't think I ever I ever would have thought that I was going to participate or spectate a French protest, but we did, and the teachers were all very excited to have us so close to the action, especially Madame Qadir. And it was a really great experience. I've never been to a protest like that. I've never really been to protests. There aren't that many in my town. And so it was really exciting. We were walking through people who had flares and torches. It was all very safe, of course, but it was really exciting to see. And I think living in Rennes and experiencing the greves on the bus, or seeing the police who have all their gear on, I think it's always like, okay, what's going on? Why is this happening? And so doing the field work, going to the greve, and then doing a presentation on it in politics class, and actually understanding the reasoning behind the protest was really important. And I think it put into perspective what was happening in France and Rennes specifically. And it's nice because at SYA, we get to learn about something in class and then go do it outside of class, which I found really valuable. And coming back to school this year, I think I'm really missing that, being able to sort of have hands-on learning, go experience what I'm talking about in class. And I think it makes what I'm learning about more valuable, and it makes me retain the information a lot more. So that was definitely a favorite.
Yeah, Annika, can I follow up that we had mentioned earlier that, we had to make that switch very quickly to online learning. And at that point of the year, we gave students the option to head back to their sending school rather than stick with SYA. And obviously you retained your study with SYA. Talk a little bit about that decision and what that online experience was like.
Yeah, I think it was all very surprising being sent home, obviously, and I think everywhere in the world people were having surprises exactly like that. And I feel really lucky that we were able to get home so quickly and in such a safe manner. But it was definitely a surprise, and I think I always sort of assumed, I'm like, well, if I do get sent home, I'm going to stick with SYA because all my teachers will be there, all my friends will be there, and so even though some of us will be 5,000 miles away or 100 miles away from each other, we'll all still be together over Zoom or FaceTime or text, doing the work together. And so it was a very hard transition, especially at first, getting used to the amount of work we had and the pace of work we had, and because it was really different from what we were doing on the ground in France. So much of what we learned was experiential, and so I think the teachers had to ask themselves, how do we transfer that into work that we can do online or on paper? And in the end, I think it was still a really valuable experience to stay with SYA for the last 3 months of my year, just to sort of finish out the year, finish out projects that we were working on. So yeah.
Oh, terrific. Let me shift gears a little bit and ask you one other question, which is we talked about the Alvarez family and the global scholarship, and you're the recipient of their generosity. If you could talk to them directly, what would you say?
I guess first off, thank you. Thank you so much. I couldn't have gone to France without their help. I think sometimes it's hard to sort of imagine how much someone can help you without you knowing the other person. And I think they really demonstrate that. They don't really know me, and I don't know them. We've never met in person, but I really appreciate the resources that they gave me to go abroad, because I couldn't have done it without them. And I I loved my experience abroad, and it was definitely one of the best things I've ever done. And so I'm so thankful that they were able to help me with that.
Well, thanks. Well, we'll make sure they hear those words. So thank you. And I'm going to ask a favor of you, Annika, which is you're now back. It's your senior year, right?
Yeah.
So you had heard from previous students who had gone SYA. So spread the good word about SYA, because for us, really, the word of mouth is the strongest thing that we have out there, and student to student, the most powerful. Because obviously it's a leap for kids. You know, it's not the usual path that students take. But as you describe, and as Mina describes, the power of that experience, the student to student and student with faculty, it's just magical. And the words I always hear, you know, I do ask alums a lot, you know, what is it that, how would you describe SYA? What can it capture in a word or two? And transformational is the word that it just comes out of everyone's mouth, that it just made a huge difference in life. And maybe I'll turn to my board chair here, and you know, he did this a few years back, right, Kirk?
A few years ago. Il y a longtemps maintenant.
So how did just quickly, kind of sticking with you throughout your professional life? I mean, how did that SYA DNA?
I still think it's the best thing I ever did in my life. And that's a powerful thing to say at age 61. And I've done a lot of fun things, but what was so great about that is at that age, to have the courage to step outside what you know and have the learning experience that when you do that, your life is enriched in ways that you can't possibly imagine, including perspectives about what it means to be an American, but also loving the host country and your host family, and having a whole different sense of what France is like. And I mean, I've just was a Francophile then, but I have stayed a Francophile my whole life because I had so many wonderful connections. And so I think and this is what I love about the adventure aspect of it. It's hard. It's not easy. And because it's hard, it takes guts to do it. And we don't want to sanitize it ever to the point that it doesn't take guts, because the payoff is learning that you can do something that scares you and end up having a transformational experience. And so that lesson has stayed with me my whole life. And I've made all sorts of other crazy decisions. Many of them have turned out to be good decisions, maybe not all, but you know, I learned not to be afraid to do something that I didn't know anyone else who had done. And that your life is a sculpture, and you should treat it as if you were the artist. And so what a wonderful thing. I see Annika nodding, which I love. And it's so awesome and powerful to me that this experience is absolutely transcends generation. I'm just looking at Annika and I feel I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, even though we're more than 40 years apart, I feel like we're just right next to each other in this experience. So awesome.
Well, wow. Well said. And you know, I know that people, when they first look at SYA, probably think about it as, well, I'll improve my language skill and all that. But there's, as you guys described, there's so much more that you gain from this. And the way, as someone who's worked with adolescents for many, many years, I think the biggest thing I see happening is that there's an empathy, because teenagers in general kind of look out at themselves and it's about themselves. And to have that broader perspective about being the other, I think is remarkable. Annika, one question I meant to ask, and I just sprung to mind, your host family, and you had, sadly, and Mina described it, we had to kind of literally rip you guys away and get you safely on planes, and because the curtain was coming down and we needed to get you out. So what was that like with your host family, and have you kept in touch?
It was really hard to leave my host family. I switched host families in November, And I loved my second host family so much. They still are my second family. I love them and I miss them so much, but it was really hard to leave them. I think everyone was getting into a really good groove. And I mean, we'd already been there for 6 months, but it's surprising how long it takes sometimes just to feel like you're in a really good groove somewhere. And I think everyone was feeling that with their host families. And so it was really challenging to leave. And I just got a notification that it's my host dad's birthday today. And I wish I could be there celebrating with him or giving him a hug, and joking with like my host siblings over a lunch or a dinner. And they were a really big part of my SYA experience. That's where I gained most of my language skills, obviously in school and doing field work, but going home and having dinner with them every night and talking to my host brother on a walk, or my host sister when walking to school, or playing card games with my little host brother and sister. So it was a really great experience living with a host family. And I spent Christmas with them this past year, and by that point I'd only known them for a month, but it felt like I had known them for so long, and it felt like I was one of the siblings, one of the kids, like I was a real part of the family. So I try and talk to them at least every month, if not every 2 weeks. So.
And that relationship will endure. So great. I'm going to turn it over to Erin in a minute or two, but Mina, I offer you a chance to offer any other thoughts and maybe even embarrass Annika a little bit about, what a great addition she was to SYA.
Oh, as her resident director, I can do that. All right. So first of all, I'm proud to be part of an organization that helps students reach their goals and fulfill their dream of studying abroad. And as a resident director level, for me, what financial aid really provides is a school that is stronger because it welcomes a bigger and a more diverse group of students who can participate in the SYA experience and enrich the overall experience for all by their presence and partaking. Which brings me to Annika, who's been an endearing and diligent member of our community here. She has had an outstanding year with us, whether it was in country or during the 3 months we were online. And a lot of adjectives come to mind when I think about you, Annika, but here are a few. Hardworking, persistent, kind, motivated, curious. And as a pillar of our program is, of course, language proficiency. And in that regard, I can say that you have progressed immensely. And I recall when I was very happily surprised that one day when you volunteered to do French extra hours, and we typically, to explain to everyone, we typically offer these French extra hours to students who need a push, my French is coming out, a push, and usually we invite students, I mean, we kind of tell them to go and do these hours, so we invite them to these hours, but Annika didn't need them, but she signed up because she actually wanted to get ahead in her language development. And so I was very happy about that. And I also learned last week from Madame Borotra, Annika's French language teacher, that she has asked to have phone conversation with her to continue speaking French. And I applaud you for that, Annika. I've used this quote with students before, but I'll say it again, like Charlemagne said, to know another language is like to possess another soul. And I have no doubt that, you will continue cultivating the treasure that is to know another language, like Kirk described earlier. All of your teachers would be unanimous and would join me in saying that it was a pleasure to have you on campus. And not to embarrass you any further, but I have a couple of paragraphs I wanted to read to you that your math teacher and your English teacher wrote to you. So first, Monsieur Northcott, Annika's math teacher, wrote, Annika was a dedicated pre-calculus student and a pleasure to have as an advisee. She was incredibly organized and highly motivated academically. She worked to stay ahead on assignments and never hesitated to ask for help when it was needed. She always focused on getting the most out of the SYA France experience, while also maintaining her academic focus to ensure a smooth return to her home school. That was Mr. Northcott. And Madame Connolly, Annika's English teacher. Annika was a key member of her English class at SYA during the year. I was impressed by her ability to collaborate with others and lead class discussions. During discussions, Annika demonstrated a keen sense of critical thinking. What stands out to me the most about Annika is her ability to relate and connect with others. There were many times in class that her classmates struggled to understand a concept or an author, such as Hemingway. Annika would pause and make sure to reframe a point or question so that it was understood by all. Furthermore, on many occasions, I noticed Annika peer editing a paper for a classmate just because she wanted to help. In sum, Annika's ability to understand and relate to literature was central to many discussions. She was a stellar student. Voila, so for time's sake, I won't share all of your teachers' feedback right now, but they all wish you success in your future academic adventures.
And you got to go back and visit them, Annika. The alums come back, right, Mina, all the time.
Oh, all the time. I actually surprisingly had one, well, given the situation here in France, we had Madeleine Furman here in Rennes about 2 weeks ago. She now lives in Paris. So she came down when you guys were talking about the host family, and I wanted to mention it earlier, but I picked other highlights. But she was here to celebrate her 10th year anniversary with her host mother. So she made the trip for the day and spend the day with her. So it's a very special bond.
Yeah, terrific. Erin, I'm going to turn this over to you because I know you need to say a few things toward the end and might want to capture a few questions.
Sure, thanks. And thanks to Tom, Kirk, Mina, and Annika for some wonderful information and stories from the year. So good to hear that. Actually, we've got a fun little small world story I'll share real quick. Ann Diedrich, who's on the webinar, wrote that she had interviewed Madeleine Furman. So just the power of, Anne is an alum, interviewed Madeleine, and now there she is back in France, and it just all continues. She had also mentioned the resource Narrative 4 and advised us to check that out, so we'll give that a look. Excuse me. And then our friend Naomi Fink, hi Naomi, if you're still on there, thanks for your question. She had said if you have 2 to 3 minutes to communicate how you think supporting this unique program will increase the diversity of American high school graduates, that she'd be interested to hear more about that. A little bit of context, she's working on a grant through her company to help provide some financial support to SYA, and I think they're particularly interested in increasing diversity. So any comments that we may have about that? And Naomi, if I don't get it, didn't get the question quite right, feel free to rephrase it in the Q&A box for me, but we'll start with that.
Want me to take a stab at that?
Sure.
Well, I hope I'm answering the question correctly, Naomi, so please type away in the chat box. I think you're on mute, so we can only hear you through the chat box. But what I think SYA does for diversity is it broadens the mind of everybody who attends. And as Tom said, it increases empathy. We learn to be in the minority, even if we're not otherwise spending our time as members of a minority group. We are minorities when we're Americans abroad. And we experience some of the difficulties of being the other person in a group of people that all have one thing in common that we don't have. So I think it's mind expanding, and I hope everybody returns with more empathy, less attachment to the world they grew up in, a little more open to new ideas and perspectives. And in that sense, more open to diverse points of view, diverse experiences, and diversity in general. So I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe let me stop there and see if I've missed it. If so, help me.
I think that's pretty good, Kirk. She had said perfect thank you in the Q&A. So
Okay,
I think you got it there. I put the last call out for questions, and while we wait to see if any of others come in, I'll just make a few wrap-up comments for us all. So just once again want to say thank you to everybody on the call for being here, for your investment in SYA, for hearing more about Annika's year and Mina's year in France, and some of the things that we're working on at the board level. I know that you've given a lot already, and including an hour of your time just today, but we would want to ask for your help in a few other ways. So one is that we always ask our community to help us spread the word, and Tom and Kirk and everybody else has already mentioned that to some extent, but I just ask, please help us with spreading the word. This is a very weird year for recruiting. Normally our admissions team hits the road and visits schools during the fall, and they do in-person visits, and they talk with students directly, and they share about the SYA experience face-to-face, and there's some power in that interaction. They're trying the virtual thing this year, and we are sure they're going to do a wonderful job still connecting with students and with schools, but we recognize it's not the same as getting in front of kids. So as much as you can open a door for us or put the word in someone's ear in your community that you know, put a poster up at school, whatever it may be, that would be really helpful for us. And then similarly, if you have already made a gift or pledge to the campaign, we would love for you to talk about the campaign with others in your SYA circle. So we are still getting the word out about the campaign for SYA. We are still asking for another $6 million over the next year to help us get to our goal. If you are comfortable talking about the campaign with your classmates, your friends, other parents, anybody you know that maybe have an interest in international education or wants to make a gift, we would appreciate that. Tom and I were on the road quite a bit last year and got the campaign in front of a lot of people, and we're doing a lot of follow-up this year, and it's looking promising. Just from the beginning of August to this month, we've brought in another 300,000, which is great. But we still got a lot of work to do ahead of us, and as much as you can help with spreading the word, we'd appreciate it. And if you haven't made a campaign gift or pledge, now's that plug, as Kirk mentioned, to hit us up, and we'd be happy to have a conversation with you more about that. Just be open to, Tom or I or someone else from our team reaching out in the coming months as we begin scheduling virtual meetings with people like you who care really deeply about SYA and want to strengthen it for the future. And then the last thing that we ask, and you're here today, and again, we're asking for a little bit more time, but if you are interested in any of our upcoming events, please tune in for some of those. We had a few great ones earlier this month, and not to toot our own horns, but Mina was on one last week with some of the other RDs and talked about the experience in country currently and within the last year in terms of changes to the curriculum that she mentioned today, and some other things that are happening in each place. And the week before, we had the first women of SYA on a panel conversation, and really interesting to hear the difference, as SYA became coeducational and what their experience was like in some of those early years. So we have them recorded. Check out our website if you haven't seen them yet. And please, attend more as we keep going into this virtual thing that we're doing. The next 4 weeks, we have informational sessions about the campaign, and if you've already made a gift, you may say, I don't need to really learn more about that. But what will be great about them is that we'll have RDs and students joining us similar to today to talk about what the campaign has been able to do. So I encourage you to sign up for some of those if there's a topic of interest for you. So with that, I'm going to give the Q&A one more look here. I think we covered everything. So I think that's about it. And thanks again to Tom, Kirk, Mina, and Annika. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you and everybody that's out there joining us today on another call in the future. So thanks again.